Alrighty. Welcome in, goblins. Welcome back to the dungeon. A place where me, do some reading, finally. Cause, today's Sunday, not Saturday, unfortunately. Also, it's not 12, more unfortunately. But no, I played a little bit too much. Played a little bit too much. I got sucked into that game yesterday. Goddamn. But as per normal, before we start, before we start, we're gonna chat. We're gonna chat a little bit. How are you guys doing so far? What's up? I'm literally just waking. I bolted out of bed like the Undertaker from WWE in his prime or in his age because he did it in both fearfully. So not gonna lie. But hello, hi, welcome into this Goblin Book Club where goblins do some goblins uh goblins. Yes. No, I woke up, I was like, oh, I'm gonna start things up. I opened up two OBSs because I can. I shouldn't have, but I did. Also, my stream is doing okay, I think. Question mark. It didn't do good in the beginning, so like if you're still buffering, then shame. I can't stop that. Is what it is. But when we're done playing, not when no, when we're done some reading, what we'll do is we can play some more Avowed, or we'll get to something else. I'm thinking we'll play some more of that. I think we'll play some more of that later. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. Yeah. Make my brain simple. That's the choice we have for later. Or we'll do some making of making of what's it called other game. I doubt it though. We'll build Minecraft stuff, or we'll do build Minecraft pack, or we'll do Avowed. I think we'll do Avowed though. Yeah, yeah. Decisions, I know, right? Decisions are horrifying. But that's fine. I have some coffee. If you guys would prefer this be the background, or would you prefer my hands and keyboard and coffee in the background? Let me know. Forever hold your peace. But I'll send you guys the thing that I'm using for the stuff. Bam, that bad boy. This is where I'm getting. This is what I'm using for all the stories because it's the complete works. I am almost done. I got like up to 204. So the horror red hook, no, the red hook, and everything below that I have left over. Before we actually can get into this, before we actually get into this, I'm gonna get some water because coffee wasn't the choice. Coffee was not the choice. Oh my god, my mouth is dry as fuck. And I know all these stories below there are long, so I'll be right back. All right, all right, right. I need to pull up you guys. But no, yeah, boy, howdy. I'm still waking up. Got myself some water. Don't worry. You can't judge me now without having water, flavored water. That's right. You can't. You can't. What? It's fine. But no, yeah, we'll go start in the horror. I think we haven't read the horror Red Hook yet. Yeah, we haven't. Okay, we'll do that one. We'll do that one. Indubitably. All right. All right. It is 1925. The horror. The horror of Red Hook. There are sacraments, in quotes, there are sacraments of evil as well as about good about us, and we live in more and move to believe in an unknown world, in a place where the caves are in shadows and dwellers in twilight. It is possible that man may sometimes return on the track of evolution, and it is my belief that an awful lore is not yet dead. Arthur Machen. McCon? Arthur McCon? Yeah. I'm gonna make this bigger because not many weeks ago, on a street corner in a village of Pascagoula, Rhode Island, a tall, heavy-built, and wholesome-looking pedestrian, furnished much specular by a singular lapse of behavior. He had, it appears, been descending the hill by the road in Chapka. Drive mainstream part two. Hmm. Maybe later. Maybe later. Maybe. Where was I? Oh. Been descending the hill by the road by Chipachet, and encountering the compact section, had turned to his left into the main thoroughfare, where several modest business blocks convey a touch of the urban. At this point, without visible provocation, he committed his astonishing lapse, staring queerly for a second at the tallest of the buildings before him, and then, with a series of terrified, hysterical shrieks, breaking into a frantic run, which ended in a stumble and a fall at the end of the crossing. Picked up and dusted off by ready hands, he was found to be unconscious, organically unhurt, and evidently cured of his sudden nervous attack. He muttered with some shamefaced explanations involved the strain he had undergone, and with downcast glance turned back up to the Chappache town road, trudging out of sight without once looking behind him. It was a strange incident to befall so large, robust, and normal-featured and capable-looking man, and the strangeness was not lessened by the remarks by the bystanders, who had recognized him as a boarder of a well-known dairyman of the outskirts of Chappache. He was, it developed, a New York police detective named Thomas F. Malone, now on a long leave of absence under medical treatment after some disproportionately arduous work on a gruesome local case, which accident had made dramatic. There had been a collapse of several old brick buildings during a raid in which he had shared, and something about the wholesale loss of life, both of prisoners and of his companions, had peculiarly appalled him. As a result, he had acquired an acute anomalous horror of any buildings even remotely suggesting the ones that which had fallen in, so that in the end mental specialists forbade him the sight of such things for an indefinite period. A police sergeant with relatives in Chappache had put forward a quaint hamlet of wooden colonial houses as an ideal spot for the psychological convalescents in thither and suffer had gone, promising never to venture among the brick-lined streets of larger villages till duly advised by the woundsocket specialist with whom he had put in touch. This walk to Pascog for magazines had been a mistake, and the patient had paid in fright, bruises, and humiliation for his disobedience. Oh, so we're talking about the investigator. Okay. Okay. So much of the gossips of Chabrachet and Pascog knew, and so much also the most learned specialist believed. But Malone had at first told the specialist much more, ceasing only when he saw that utter incredulity was his portion. Thereafter, he held his peace, protesting not at all when it was generally agreed. To the collapse of certain squalid brick houses in the Red Hook section of Brooklyn, and the consequent death of many brave officers had unseated his nervous equilibrium. He had worked too hard, all set in trying to clean up those nests of disorder and violence. Certain features were shocking enough and all conscious, and the unexpected tragedy was the last straw. This was the simple explanation which everyone could understand, and because Malone was not a simple person, he perceived that he had better let it suffice. to hint to an unimaginative people of the horror beyond all conception, a horror of houses and blocks in cities, leprous and cancerous, with evil dragged from elder worlds, would be merely to invite a padded cell instead of restful rustication. And Malone was a man of sense despite his mysticism. He had a kill's fear, far vision of weird and hidden things, but the logician's quick eye of the outward unconvincing, an amalgam which had led him afar afield in the 42 years of his life, and set him in the strange places of a Dublin university. Man born in a Georgian villa near Phoenix Park. He's got to stop using big words. Oh, those are hurting me. And now, as he reviewed the things he had seen and felt and apprehended, Malone was content to keep unshared the secrets of what could reduce a dauntless fighter to a quivering neurotic. What could make old brick slums and seas of dark, subtle faces a thing of nightmare and eldritch portent? It would not be the first time his sensations had been forced to bide uninterrupted, for was not his very act of plunging into the polyglot abyss of New York's underworld a freak beyond sensible explanation? What could he tell a Prozac of the antique witcheries and the grotesque marvels discernible to sensible eyes, and amid the poison cauldron where all the varied, oh my god, voices, mm, unwholesome ages mix their venom and perpetuate their obscene terrors? He had seen the hellish green flame of secret wonder in the blatant, evasive welter of outward greed and inward blasphemy. You're right. Thank you, thank you. Mm, mm. Despite many poignant things in his credit in the Dublin Review, even write a truly interesting story of New York low life. And now looking back, he perceived that cosmic irony that had justified the prophet's words while secretly confuting their flippant meaning. The horror, as glimpsed at last, could not make a story, for like the book cited by Poe's German authority, his last Nicholas, and I'm butchering it, but it's fine. It does not permit itself to be read. To Malone, the sense of latent mystery, too, in existence was always present. In youth, he had felt the hidden beauty and ecstasy of things, and had been a poet. But poverty, and sorrow, and and exile had turned his gaze in darker directions, and he had thrilled at the imputations of evil in the world around daily life had come from to be a phantasmagoria of macabre shadow studies, now glittering and leering with concealed rottenness, as in Beardsley's best manner, now hinting terrors behind the commonest shapes and objects, as in the subtler and less obvious work of Gustave Doré. He would often regard it as merciful, and most persons of high intelligence jeer at the most mysteries, for he argued, if superior minds were ever placed in fullest contact with the secrets preserved by ancient and lowly cults, the resultant abnormalities would soon not only wreck the world, but threaten the very integrity of the universe. All this reflection was no doubt morbid, but keen logic and a deep sense of humor ably offset it. Malone was satisfied to let his notions remain as half-spiced and forbidden visions to be lightly played with, and hysteria came only when duty flung him into the hell of revelation, too sudden and insidious to escape. He had for some time being detailed to the Butler Street station in Brooklyn when the Red Hook matter came to his notice. Red Hook is a maze of hybrid squalor near the ancient waterfront opposite of Governor's Island, with dirty highways climbing the hill from the wharves to the higher ground where the decayed flanks of Clinton and Court Streets lie off toward the Borough Hall. Its houses are mostly brick, dating from the first quarter of the middle of the 19th century. In some obscure alleys and byways have that alluring antique flavor, which conventional reading leads to us to call Dickensian. The population is a hopeless tangle of Enigma, Syrian and Spanish, Italian elements impinging upon one another, and fragments of Scandinavian and American belts lying not so far distant. It is a babel of sound and filth and sounds out strange cries to answer the lapping and oily waves at its grimy piers in the monstrous organ litanies of the harbor whistles. Here long ago a brighter picture dwelt, with clear eyes, mariners on the lower streets and homes of taste and substance, where the larger houses line the hill. One can trace the relics of this former happiness in the trim shape of the building, the occasional grace churches, and the evidence of original art in the background in bits and detail here and there. A worn flight of steps, a battered doorway, a wormy pair of decorative columns of pilasters, or a fragment of once green space with bent and rusted iron railing. The houses are generally in solid blocks, and now and then a many-windowed cupola arises to tell of days when the households and captains and ship owners watched the sea. From this tangle of materials and spiritual putrance, the blasphemies of 100 dialects assail the sky. Hordes of prowlers reel shouting and sing along the lanes and thoroughfares, occasionally furtive hands, suddenly extinguish lights and pull down curtains and sorely sin-pitted faces disappear from windows when visitors pick their way through. Policemen despair of order to reform and seek rather to erect barriers protecting the outside world from the contagion. The clang of the patrol is answered by a kind of spectral silence, and such prisoners are never communicative. Visible offenses are as varied as local dialects, and run the gamut from the smuggling of rum and prohibited millions through the diverse stages of lawlessness and obscure vice, to murder and mutilation in the most abhorrent guises. That these visible affairs are not more frequent is not to the neighborhood's credit, unless the power of concealment be an art demanding credit. More people enter Red Hook than leave it, or at least than leave it by the landward side, and those who are not loquacious are the likeliest to leave. I don't know what that word means. Malone found in this state of things a faint stench of secret, more terrible than any of the sins, denounced by citizens and bemoaned by priests and philanthropists. He was conscious, as one who united imagination with scientific knowledge, that modern people under lawlessness conditions tend uncannily to repeat the darkness, instinctive patterns of primitive half-ape savagery in their daily life and ritual observances. And he had often viewed with an anthropologist's shudder, enchanting cursing processions of blear-eyed and pocket-marked young men which wound their way along in the dark small hours of morning. One saw groups of these youths incessantly, sometimes in leering vigils on street corners, sometimes in doorways playing eerily on cheap instruments of music, sometimes in stupefied dozes or indecent dialogues around cafeteria tables near Borough Hall, and sometimes in whispering converse around dingy taxicabs drawn by the high stoops of crumbling, closely shuttered old houses. The children fascinated him more than he dared to confess to his associates on the force, for he seemed to see in them some monstrous thread of a secret continuity, some fiendish, cryptical, and ancient pattern utterly beyond and below the sordid mass of facts and habits and haunts, listed with such conscientious technical care by the police. They must be, he felt inwardly, the heirs of some shocking primordial tradition, the sharers of debased and broken scraps from cults and ceremonies older than mankind. Their coherence and definiteness suggested it, and it shewed in the singular suspicion of order which lurked beneath their squalid disorder. He had not read in vain such treatises as Miss Murray's Witch Cult in Western Europe, and he knew that up to the recent years there had certainly survived among peasants of furtive folk in frightful and clandestine systems of assemblies and orgies descended from dark religions, antedating the Aryan world and appearing in the popular legends as black masses and witches' sabbaths. That these hellish vestiges of old Tyrian Asiatic magic and fertility cults were even now the wholly dead, and he could not for a moment suppose, and he frequently wondered, how much older and how much younger than the very most of the most muttered tales some of them might really be. All right, drinking time. And a lot of water. Uh, mm, uh. So it seems like this place changes people. Cool. Hmm. Part three. It was the case of Robert Soydam, which took Malone to the heart of things in Red Hook. Soydam was a letter recluse of ancient Dutch family, possessed originally of barely independent means, and inhabiting the spacious but ill-preserved mansion which his grandfather had built in Flatbush. That village was little more than a pleasant group of colonial cottages surrounding the steepled and ivy-clad Reformed church with its iron-railed yard of Netherlandish gravestones, and his lonely house set back in Martinez Street amid a yard of venerable trees. Sidam had read and brooded for some 6 decades, except for a period of generation before, when he had sailed for the old world and remained there out for a sight of 8 years. He couldn't afford no servants, and would admit but few visitors to his absolute solitude, eschewing close friendships and receiving his rare acquaintances in one of the 3 ground-floor rooms, which he kept in order, a vast high sealed library whose walls were solidly packed with tattered books and ponderous, archaic, and vaguely repellent aspect. The growth of the town and its final absorption of the Berlin district had meant nothing to him, and he had come to mean less and less to the town. Elderly people still pointed him out on the streets, but to most of the recent population, he was merely a queer corpulent old fellow whose unkempt white hair, stubbly beard, shiny black clothes, and gold-headed cane earned him an amused glance and nothing more. Malone did not know him by sight till duty called him into the case, but had heard of him indirectly as a really profound authority on medieval superstition, and had once idly meant to look up an out of print pamphlet of his on the Kabbalah in the Faustus legend, which a friend of had quoted from memory. Mm. So it became a case when his distant and only relatives sought court pronouncements of his sanity. Their action seemed sudden to the outside world, but was really undertaken only after his prolonged observation and sorrowful debate. It was based on certain changes in his speech and habits, wild references of impending wonders and unaccountable hauntings of disreputable Brooklyn neighborhoods. He had been growing shabbier and shabbier within the years, and now proud about like a veritable mendicant, seen occasionally by humiliated friends in subway stations or loitering on the benches around Borough Hall in conversation with groups of swarthy, evil-looking strangers. Man, I would love to see an evil-looking stranger. That'd be pretty silly. When he spoke, it was to babble of unlimited powers almost within his grasp, and to repeat with knowing leers such mystical words or names as Sapphiroth, Asmodai, and Samiel. The court action revealed that he was using up his income and wasting his principal in the purchase of curious tomes imported from London, Paris, and in the maintenance of a squalid basement flat in the Red Hook district, where he spent nearly every night. Received odd delegations of mixed rowdies and foreigners, and apparently conducting some kind of ceremonial service behind the green blinds of secretive windows. Detectives assigned to follow him reported strange cries and chants and prancing of feet filtering out of these nocturnal rites, and shuddering at their peculiar ecstasy, and abandoned despite the commonness of weird orgies in that sodden section. When, however, the matter came to a hearing, Sweden managed to preserve his liberty before the judge. His manner grew urban and reasonable, and he freely admitted the queerness and demeanor of the extravagant cast of language into which He had fallen through excessive devotion to study in which he was, he said, engaged in the investigation of certain details of European tradition, which required the closest contact with foreign groups in their songs and folk dances. The notion that any low secret society was preying upon him, as hinted by his relatives, was obviously absurd, and showed how sadly limited was their understanding of him and his work. Triumphing with his calm explanations, he was suffered to depart unhindered, and the paid detectives of the Soidums, Quarlers, and the Van Brunts were withdrawn to resign disgust. It was here that an alliance of federal inspectors and police, Malone with them, entered the case. The law had watched the Soydun action with interest, and had in many instances been called upon to aid the private detectives. In this work, it developed that Soydun's new associates were among the 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 most vicious criminals of Red Hook's devious lanes, and that at the least a third of them were known and repeated offenders in the matter of thievery, disorder, and the important importation of illegal immigrants. Indeed, it would not have been too much to say that the old scholar's particular circle coincided almost perfectly with the worst of the organized cliques, which smuggled ashore certain nameless and unclassified dregs of society, which wisely turned back to by Ellis Island in the teeming rookery of Pargery Place, since renamed, where Soydam had his basement flat. There had grown up a very unusual colony of unclassified who had used the Arabic alphabet there, but were eloquently repudiated by the great mass of Syrians in and around Atlantic Avenue. Oh my God. They could have all been deported for lack of credentials, but legalism is slow moving, and one does not disturb Red Hook unless publicly forces one to. These creatures attended a tumble-town stone church, used Wednesdays as a dance hall, which reared its Gothic buttresses near the vitalistic part of the waterfront. It was nominally a Catholic, but priests throughout Brooklyn denied the place all standing in authenticity, and policemen agreed with them when they listened to the noises it emitted at night. Malone used to fancy he heard terrible cracked bass notes from a hidden organ far underground when the church stood empty and unlighted, whilst all observers shredded and shrieked and drummed, well accompanied by the visible services. Soydam, when questioned, said he thought the ritual was some remnant of Nestorian Christianity, tinctured with the shamanism of Tibet. Most of the people, he conjectured, were originating somewhere in or near Kurdistan, and Malone could not help recalling that Kurdistan is the land of the Yazidis, last survivors of the Persian devil worshippers. However, this may have been the stir of the Soydam investigation made it certain that these unauthorized newcomers were flooding Red Hook in increasing numbers, entering through some marine conspiracy unreached by revenue officers and harbor police, overrunning Parker Place and rapidly spreading up the hill and welcomed with curious fraternalism by the other assorted denizens of the region. Their squat figures and characteristic squinting physiognomies, grotesquely combined with the flashy American clothing, appeared more and more numerously among the loafers and nomad gangsters of the Borough Hall section, till at length it was deemed necessary to compute their numbers, ascertain their sources and occupations, and find it possible a way to round them up and deliver them to proper immigration authorities. To this task Malone was assigned by agreement of federal and city forces. And as he commenced his canvass of Red Hook, he felt poised upon the brink of nameless terrors in the shabby, unkempt figure of Robert Soydam as arch-fiend and adversary. Oh, damn. Damn. Alright. Big breaths now. I gotta take more pauses. I do. I forget to do that. Part 4. Police methods are varied and ingenious, Malone through instantaneous rambles, carefully casual conversations, well-timed offers of hip-pocket liquor, and Judaist dialogues with frightened prisoners. Learned many isolated facts about the movement whose aspect had become so menacing. The newcomers were indeed Kurds, but a dialect obscure and puzzling to exact theology. Such of them as worked lived mostly as dockhands and unlicensed peddlers, though frequently serving in Greek restaurants and tending corner news stands. Most of them, however, had no visible means of support and were obviously connected with underworld pursuits, of which smuggling and bootlegging were the least indescribable. With underworld pursuits, they had come in steamships, apparently trim freighters, and had been unloaded by stealth on nights, nights in rowboats which stole under a certain wharf and followed a hidden canal to a secret subterranean pool beneath the house. This wharf, canal, and house Malone could not locate, for those memories of his informants were exceedingly confused, while their speech was to a great extent beyond even the ablest interpreters. Nor could he gain any real data on the reasons of their systematic importation. They were reticent of the exact spot from which they had come, and were never sufficiently off guard to reveal the agencies which had sought them out and directed their course. Indeed, they developed something like acute fright when asked the reasons of their presence. Gangsters of other breeds were equally taciturn, and the most that could be gathered was that some god of great priesthood had promised them unheard powers in supernatural glories and rulerships in the strange land. The attendance of newcomers and old gangsters of Soidom's closely guarded nocturnal meetings was very regular, and the police soon learned that the erstwhile recluse had leased additional flats to accommodate such guests as knew his password. At last, occupying three entire houses and permanently harboring many of his career companions. He spent but little time now at the Flatbush house, apparently going and coming only to obtain and return books, and his face and manner had attained an appalling pitch of wildness. Malone twice interviewed him, but was each time brusquely replies he knew nothing. He said as any interviewed him, he knew nothing, mysterious plots or movements, and had no idea how the herds could have entered or what they wanted. His business was to study undisturbed the folklore of all the immigrants of the district, a business with which policemen had no legitimate concern. Malone mentioned his admiration of Sweetum's old brochure on the Kabbalah and other myths, but the old man's admiration of the brochure on the man's softening was only momentary. He sensed an intrusion, and rebuffed his visitor in no uncertain way, till Malone withdrew disgusted, and turned to other channels of information. What Malone would have unearthed could he have worked continuously on the case, we shall never know. As it was, stupid, a conflict between city and federal authority suspended the investigations for several months, during which the detective was busy with other assignments. But at no time did he lose interest or fail to stand amazed at what began to happen to Robert Soydem. Just in time when a wave of kidnappings and disappearances spread its excitement over New York. The unkempt scholar embarked upon a metamorphosis as startling as it was absurd. One day he was seen near Borough Hall with clean-shaved face, well-trimmed hair, and tastefully immaculate attire, and on every day thereafter, some obscure improvement was noticed in him. He maintained his new fastidious without interruption, added it to an unwonted sparkle of eye and crispness of speech, and began little by little to shed the corpulence which had so long deformed him. Now frequently taken for less than his age, he acquired an elasticity of step and buoyancy of demeanor to match the new tradition, and shewed a curious darkening of the hair, which somehow did not suggest dye. As the months passed, he commenced to dress less and less conservatively, and finally astonished his new friends by renovating and redecorating the Flatbush mansion, which he threw open in a series of receptions and summoning all the acquaintances he could remember. and extending a special welcome to the fully forgiven relatives who had so lately sought his restraint. Some attended through curiosity, others through duty, but all were suddenly charmed by the dawning grace and urbanity of the former hermit. He asserted accomplished most of his allotted work, and having just inherited some property from a half-forgotten European friend, was about to spend his remaining years in a grateful second youth which ease and diet had made possible to him. Less and less was he seen at Red Hook, and more did he move in the society to which he was born. Policemen noted tendency of the gangsters and congregate at the old stone church and dance hall instead of at the basement flat in the Parker Place, though the latter of its recent annexes still overflowed with noxious life. The two incidents occurred wide enough apart, but both of intense interest in the case as Malone envisaged it. One was a quiet announcement in the Eagle of Robert Soydham's engagement to Miss Cornelia Gertson of Bayside, a young woman of excellent position and distantly related to the elderly bridegroom-elect. Whilst the other was a raid on the dance hall church by the city police, after a report that the face of the kidnapped child had been seen for a second time at one of the basement windows. Malone had participated in this raid and studied the place with much care when inside. Nothing was found. In fact, the building was entirely deserted when visited, but the sensitive Celt was vaguely disturbed by many things about the interior. Worldly and sardonic expressions. No, there were crudely painted panels he did not like, panels which depicted sacred faces which peculiar worldly and sardonic expressions, and which occasionally took liberties that even a layman's sense of decorum could scarcely countenance. Then, too, he did not relish the Greek inscription on a wall above the pulpit, an ancient incantation which he had once stumbled upon in Dublin college days, and which read, literally translated, "O friend, a companion of night, thou rejoiced in the baying of dogs and spilt blood, who wandering in the midst shades among the tombs, who longest for blood, and bringing terror to mortals, Gorgo, Mormo, thousand-faced moon, look favorably on our sacrifices." When he read this, he shuddered, and thought vaguely of the cracked bass organ notes he fancied he had heard beneath the church on certain nights. He shuddered again at the rust around him, around the rim of the metal basin which stood on the altar, and paused nervously when his nostrils seemed to detect a curious and ghastly stench from somewhere in the neighborhood. That organ memory haunted him, and he explored the basement with particular assiduity before he left. The place was very hateful to him, yet after all, were the blasphemous panels and inscriptions more than mere crudities perpetuated by the ignorant? By the time of Soydam's wedding and the kidnapping epidemic had become a popular newspaper scandal, most of the victims were young children to the lowest classes. But the increasing number of disappearances had worked up a sentiment of the strongest fury. Journals clamored for action from the police, and once more the Butler Street station sent its men over Red Hook for clues, discoveries, and criminals. Malone was glad to be on the trail again, and took pride in a raid in one of the Sodom Park Place's houses. There, indeed, no still child was found, despite the tales of screams and the red sash picked up by the areaway, but the paintings and rough descriptions on the peeling walls of most of the rooms, and the primitive chemical laboratory in the attic, all helped convince the detective that he was on a track of something tremendous. The painting appalling, hideous monsters of every shape and size, and parodies of human outline, which cannot be described. The writing was in red, and varied from Arabic to Greek, Roman, Hebrew letters. Malone could not read much of it, but what he did decipher was pretentious and cabalistic enough. One frequently repeated motto was in the sort of Hebraic, Hellenistic Greek, instead that most terrible daemon evocations of the Alexandrian decadence. Watch me butcher this, guys. Watch me. Hel, Holium, Sother, Habnaval, Sabioth, Agla, Tadragamon, Jagathamon, Agros, Altheos, Iskiros, Athenodos, Iova, Va, Adne, Sadai, Amovision, Massiuses, Escrosirikai. That actually felt like me reading from the old Disney thing about Moses, when in Egypt, it felt like that. Like when it starts going Sakrapla, Omnotet, Ra, Ooh, Sibi, Ra. It felt like that. It feels like that. Circles and pentagrams loomed on every hand and told indubitably of the strange beliefs and aspirations of those who dwelt so squalidly here. In the cellar, however, the strangest thing was found. A pile of genuine gold ingots, covered carelessly with a piece of burlap and bearing open their shining surfaces, the same weird hieroglyphics, which also adorned the walls during the raid encountered only a passive resistance from the squinting Orientals that swarmed from every door. Finding nothing relevant, they had to leave all as it was. The precinct captain wrote Saidam a note advising him to look closely to the character of his tenants and proteges in view of the growing public clamor. All right, drinking time. Part 5. Then came the June wedding, and with great sensation. Flatbush was gay for the hour, but about high noon, impenitent motors thronged the streets near the old Dutch church, where awnings stretched from doorway to highway. No local event ever surpassed the sight of Curtis and Newbills in tone and scale, and the party which escorted bride and groom to the Coneyard Pier was, if not exactly the smartest, at least a solid page from the social register. At 5 o'clock, adixes were waved, and the ponderous liner edged away from the long pier slowly turned its nose seaward, discarded its tug, and headed for the widening water spaces that led to old world wonders. By night, the outer harbor was cleared, and lake passengers watched the stars twinkling above the unpolluted ocean. Whether the tramp steamer or the scream was first to gain attention, no one can say. Probably they were simultaneous, but it is of no use to calculate. The scream came from the Swedem sailor room, and the sailor who broke down the door could perhaps have told frightful things if he had not forthright with gone completely mad as it is. He shrieked more loudly than the first victims, and therefore, thereafter, ran simpering about the vessel till caught and put in irons. The ship's doctor, who entered the stateroom and turned on the lights at a moment later, did not go mad, but told nobody what he saw till afterward. When he corresponded with Malone and Capuchet, it was murder, strangulation, but one need not to say that the claw mark on Miss Wyndham's throat could not have come from her husband or any other human hand. Or upon the white wall there flickered an instant hateful red legend, which later copied from memory seemed to have been nothing less than the fearsome Chaldee letters of a word, Lilith. One need not mention these things, because they vanished so quickly. As for the doctor, was distinctly assured Malone that he did not see it. The open porthole, just before he turned on the lights, was clouded for a second with a certain phosphorescence, and for a moment there seemed to be an echo in the night outside the suggestion of a faint and hellish tittering, but no outline met the eye, as proof the doctor's points to his continued sanity. Then the tramp steamer claimed all attention, a boat put off, and a horde of swart, insolent ruffians and officers dressed swarmed aboard the contemporary halted Conador. They wanted Soden or his body. They had known of his trip, and for certain reasons were sure he would die. The captain's deck was almost a pandemonium, for at the instant between the doctor's report in the stateroom and the demands of the man from the tramp, not even the wisest and gravest seaman could think what to do. Suddenly, the leader of the visiting mariners, an Arab with a hatred, pulled forth a dirty, crumpled paper and handed it to the captain. It was signed by Robert Soydam and bore the following odd message. In case of sudden or unexplained accident or death on my part, please deliver me or my body unquestioningly into the hands of the bearer of his associates. Everything for me, and perhaps for you, depends on absolute compliance. Explanations can come later. Do not fail me now. Robert Soydam. Captain and doctor looked at each other, and the latter whispered to the former. Finally, they nodded rather helplessly and led the way to the Soydam stateroom. The doctor directed the captain's glance away as he unlocked the door and admitted the strange seaman. Nor did he breathe easily till they filed out with their burden after an unaccountably long period of preparation. It was wrapped in bedding from the berths, and the doctor was glad that the outlines were not very revealing. Somehow, the men got the thing over the side and away to the tramp steamer without uncovering it. The Commodore stated again, and the doctor and ship's undertaker sought out the Soydam stateroom to perform what last services they could. Once more, the physician was forced to reticence and even to mendicity, for a hellish thing had happened. When the undertaker asked him why he had drained off all of Miss Soydam's blood, he neglected to affirm that he had not done so, nor did he point to the vacant bottle spaces of the rack, or to the odor in the sink which shewed the hasty disposition of the bottle's original contents. The pockets of those men, if men they were, had bulged damnably when they left the ship. Ooh. 2 hours later, and the world knew by radio all that it ought to know of the horrible affair. Part 6. That same June evening, without having heard a word from the sea, Malone was desperately busy among the alleys of Red Hook. A sudden stir seemed to permeate the place, and as if appraised by a grapevine telegraph of something singular, the denizens clustered expectantly around the dance hall, church, and the houses in Park Place. 3 children had just appeared, blue-eyed Norwegians, from the streets toward Gunnis, and there were rumors of a mob forming among the 3 Vikings of that section. Malone had for weeks been urging his colleagues to attempt a general clean-up, and at last, moved by the conditions more obvious to their common sense to the conjectures of a Dublin dreamer, they had agreed upon a final stroke. The unrest and menace of this evening had been the deciding factor, and just about midnight, a raiding party recruited from 3 stations descended upon the Parker Place and its environs. Doors were battered in, stragglers arrested in candle-lighted rooms and forced to disgorge unbelieved throngs of mixed foreigners in figured robes, miters, and other inexplicable devices. Much was lost in the melee, for objects were thrown hastily down unexpected shafts, and betraying odors deadened by the sudden kindling of pungent incense. But spattering blood was everywhere, and Malone shuddered whenever he saw a brazier or altar from which the smoke was still rising. He wanted to be in several places at once and decided on Soydam's basement flat only after a messenger had reported the complete emptiness of a dilapidated dance hall church. The flat, he thought, must hold some clue to a cult of which the occult scholar had so obviously become the center and leader, and it was with expectancy that he ransacked the musty rooms, noted their vaguely charnel odor, and examined the curious books, instruments, gold ingots, and glass stoppered bottles scattered carelessly here and there. Once a lean black and white cat edged between his feet and tripped him, overturning at the same time a beaker half full of red liquid. The shock was severe, and to this day Malone is not certain what he saw, but in dreams he still pictures that the cat is scuttled away with certain monstrous alterations and peculiarities. Then came the locked cellar door, and the sounds of something to break it down. A heavy stool stood near, and its tough seat was more than enough for the antique panels. A crack formed and enlarged, and the whole door gave away, but from the other side. whence poured a howling tumult of ice-cold wind with all the stenches of the bottomless pit, and whence reached a suckling force not of earth or heaven, which coiling sentiently about the paralyzed detective, dragged him through the aperture and emerged unmeasured spaces filled within the whispers and wails and gusts of mocking laughter. Of course, it was a dream. All the specialists have told him so, and he has nothing to prove to the contrary. Indeed, he would rather have it thus, for then he the sight of old brick slums and dark foreign faces could not eat so deeply into his soul. But at the time it was all horribly real, and nothing could ever efface the memory of those nighted crypts, those tightened arcades, and those half-formed shapes of hell that strode gigantically in silence, upholding half-eaten things who still surviving portions screamed for mercy or laughed with madness. Odors of incense and corruption joined in the sickening concert. The black air was alive with the cloudy, semi-visible, but with shapeless elementals, things with eyes. Somewhere dark, sticky water was lapping at the onyx pyres, and once the shivery tinkle of raucous little bells pealed out to greet the insane titter of the naked phosphorescent thing which swam to the sight, scrambled ashore, and climbed on up to squat leeringly on a carved golden pedestal in the background. Avenues of limitless night seemed to radiate in every direction, till one might fancy that they lay the root of contagion, destined to sicken and swallow cities, and engulf nations in the fodor of hybrid pestilence. Here cosmic sin had entered, infested by unhallowed rites, and commenced the grinning march of death. That this was to rot us all to the fungus abnormalities, too hideous for the grave's holding. Satan here held his Babylonish court, and in the blood of stainless childhood, the lapras limbs of the phosphorescent Lilith were laved, incubi and succubi, howled praise to Hecate, and headless moon cows bleated to the magnum mater. Goats leaped to the sound of thin accursed flutes, and eggpins chased endlessly after the misshapen fawns over rocks twisted like swollen toads. Moloch and Ashtaroth were not absent, for in this quintessence of all damnation, the bounds of consciousness were let down, and man's fancy lay upon the vistas of every realm of horror and for every forbidden dimension that evil had power to mold. The world and nature were helpless against such assaults from unsealed wells of night, nor could any sign or prayer check the Walpurgis riot of horror which had come when a sage with the hateful key had stumbled on a hoard with a locked and brimming coffer of transmitted demon lore. Suddenly, a ray of physical light shot through these phantasms, and Malone heard the sound of oars amidst of blasphemies of things that should be dead. A boat with a lantern in its prow darted into sight, made fast to an iron ring in the slimy stone pyre, and vomited forth several dark men bearing a long burden swathed in bedding. They took it to the naked, phosphorescent thing on the carved golden pedestal, and the thing tittered and pawed at the bedding, and they unswathed it. And propped upright before the pedestal, the gangrenous corpse of a corpulent old man in stubby beard, and unkempt white hair. This phosphorescent thing tittered again, and the man produced bottles from their pockets and anointed its feet with red, whilst they afterward gave the bottles to the thing to drink from. All at once, the arcaded avenue leading endlessly away, there came a demonic rattle and wheeze of a blasphemous organ, choking and rumbling at the mockeries of hell in a cracked sardonic bass. In an instant, every moving entity was electrified and forming at once into a ceremonial procession. The nightmare horde slithered away in a quest of the sound. Goat, satyr, and aging incubus succubi, and lemur, twisted toad, and shapeless elemental dog-faced howler and silent strutter in the dark, all led by the abominable naked phosphorescent thing that had squatted on a carved golden throne, and that now strode insolently
bearing in its arms a glassy-eyed corpse of the corpulent old man. The strange dark men danced in the rear, and the whole column skipped and leaped in diatonic fury. Malone staggered after them with a few steps, delirious and hazy, and doubtfully of his place in this or in any world. Then he turned, faltered, and sank down on the cold, damp stone, gasping and shivering as the demonic organ croaked on, and the howling and drumming and tinkling of the mad procession grew fainter and fainter. Vaguely, he was conscious of chanted horrors and shocking croakings afar. Now and then a wail of whine and ceremonial devotion would float to him, the low black arcade, while eventually there rose the dreadful Greek incantation whose text he had read above the pulpit of that dance hall church. O friend, the companion of night, thou who rejoiced in the bayest of dogs, here a hideous howl burst forth. And spilt blood, here name sounds with morbid shriekings. Who wanderest in the midst of the shades among the tombs, here whistling sigh occurred. Who longest for blood and bringest terror to mortals, short, sharp cries from myriad throats. Gorgo, repeated as response. Mormo, repeated with ecstasy. Mormo! Thousands faced moons, sighs with and flute notes. Look favorably on our sacrifices. As the chant closed, a general shout went up, and hissing sounds nearly drowned the croaking and cracked bass organ. Then a gasp as from many throats, a babble of barked and bleated words. Lilith, great Lilith, behold the bridegroom. More cries, and a clamor of rioting and the sharp, clicking footfalls of a running figure. The footfalls approached, and Malone raised himself to his elbow to look. The luminosity of the crypt, lately diminished, had now slightly increased in the double light. There appeared the fleeing form of that which should not flee or feel or breathe, that glassy-eyed, gangrenous corpse of the corpulent old man, now needing no support, but animated by some infernal sorcery of the rite just closed. After it raced the naked, tittering, phosphorescent thing that belonged on the carven pedestal, and still farther beyond panted the dark men, and all the dread crew of the sentient loathsomeness. The corpse was gaining on its pursuers, and seemed bent on a definite object, straining with every rotting muscle toward the carved pedestal, whose necromantic importance was evidently so great. Another moment, and it had reached its goal. Whilst the trailing throng labored on with more frantic speed, they were too late. For in one final spurt of strength, which ripped tendon from tendon and sent its noisome bulk floundering to the floor, in a state of jellish dissolution, and the staring corpse which had been Robert Soydam achieved its object and its triumph. The muddy botch of corruption pedestal he had pushed tottered, tipped, and finally careened from its honest base into the thick waters below, sending up a parting gleam of carven gold as it sank heavily to undreamable gulfs of lower Tartarus. In that instant, too, the whole scene of horror faded to nothingness before Malone's eyes, and he fainted amidst a thunderous crash which seemed to blot out all the evil universe. Part 7. I'm going to take a sip first. I'm going to take a good little sip. Hmm. Alright. Part 7. Malone's dream, experienced in full view before he knew of Swayden's death and transfer at sea, was curiously supplemented by some odd realities of the case, though there's no reason why anyone should believe it. The 3 old houses in Parker Place, doubtlessly long rotten with decay in its most insidious form, collapsed without visible cause, while half the raiders and most of the prisoners were inside, and a both greater number were instantly killed. Only in the basements and cellars was there much saving of life, and Mullen was like to have been deep below the house of Robert Soydam, for he really was there, as no one is disposed to deny. They found him unconscious by the edge of the night black pool, with a grotesquely horrible jumble of decay and bones, identifiable through dental work as the body of Soydam. A few feet away, the case was plain, for it was hither that the smugglers' underground canal led, and the men who took Soydam from the ship had brought him home. They themselves were never found, or at least never identified, and the ship's doctor is not yet satisfied with the simple certitudes of the police. Soydam was evidently a leader in an extensive man smuggling operations for the canal to his house. Was but one of the several subterranean channels and tunnels in the neighborhood. There was a tunnel from his house to the crypt beneath the dance hall church, and a crypt accessible from the church only through a narrow secret passage in the north wall, and in whose chamber some singular and terrible things were discovered. The croaking organ was there, as well as the vast arched chapel with wooden benches and a strangely figured altar, the walls lined with small cells, and 17 of which, hideous to relate, solitary prisoners, in a state of complete idiocy, were found chained, including 4 mothers with infants of disturbingly strange appearance. These infants died soon after exposure to the light, a circumstance which the doctors thought rather merciful. Nobody but Malone, among those who inspected them, remembered the sombre question of old Delirio, and sint in quam demons incubi et secubi et extali congressu pralis nazis quat. I butchered it. So, before the canals were filled up they were thoroughly dredged and yielded forth a sensational area of sod and split bone of all sizes. The kidnapping epidemic very clearly had been traced home, though only 2 of the surviving prisoners could by any legal thread be connected with it. These men are now in prison, since they failed conviction as accessories in the actual murders. The carved golden pestle or throne, so often mentioned by Malone as a primary occult importance, was never brought to light, though at one place under the Soydam house the canal was observed to sink into a well too deep for dredging. It was choked about the mouth and cemented over when the cellars of the new houses were made, but Malone often speculates on what lies beneath. The police, satisfied that they had shut out a dangerous gang of maniacs and mansmugglers, turned over the federal authorities, and then convicted nerds who before their deported, were conclusively found to belong to the Azai clan of devil worshippers. The tramp ship and its crew remaining an elusive mystery, though cynical detectives are once more ready to combat its smuggling and rum-running ventures. Malone thinks these detectives show a sadly limited perspective on their lack of wonder at the myriad unexplainable details, and the suggestive obscurity of the whole case. Though he is just as critical of the newspapers, which saw only a morbid sensation, and gloated over a minor sadist cult, which they might have proclaimed a horror from the universe's very heart. He is content to rest in silent in Chapache, calming his nervous systems and praying that time may gradually transfer his terrible experience from the realm of present reality to that of a picturesque and semi-mythical remoteness. Robert Soydam sleeps beside his bride in Greenwood Cemetery. No funeral was held over the stranger's released bones, and relatives are grateful for the swift oblivion which overtook the case as a whole. The scholar's connection with the Red Hook horrors, indeed, was never emblazoned by legal proof, since his death forestalled the inquiry he would otherwise have faced. His own end is not much mentioned, and the Soydams had hoped that posterity may recall him only as a gentle recluse who dabbled in the harmless magic and folklore. As for Red Hook, it is always the same. Soydam came and went, a terror gathered and faded, but the evil spirit of darkness and squalor broods on amongst the mongrels in the old brick houses, and prowling bands still parade unknown errands past windows where lights and twisted faces unaccountably appear and disappear, Age-old horror is a hydra with 1,000 heads, and the cult of darkness rooted in blasphemous deeper with a well of Democritus and the soul of the beast is omnipresent and triumphant. The Red Hook's legion is blear-eyed and pockmarked with youths still chant and curse and howl as they file thee from abyss to abyss. None knows whence or whither pushed or on by a blind laws of biology, which they may never understand. As of old, more people enter Red Hook than leave it on the landward side. And there are already rumors of new canals running underground to certain centers of traffic and liquor and less mentionable things. The dance hall church is now mostly a dance hall, and queer faces have appeared at night at the windows. Lately, a policeman expressed the belief that the filled little crypt had been dug out again, and for no simply explainable purpose. Who are we to combat poisons older than the history of mankind? Apes danced in Asia to those horrors, and the cancer lurks secure and spreading with furtiveness hides in rows of bricklaying, decaying brick. Malone does not shudder without cause, for only the other day an officer overheard swarthy, squinting hag teaching a small child some whispered patois in the shadow of an alleyway. He listened, and thought it very strange when he heard her repeat over and over again, "O friend and companion of night, thou who rejoiced in the baying of dogs and split blood, who wanderest in the midst of shades among the tombs, who longest for blood and bringing terror to mortals, Gorgo, Mormo, the thousand-faced moon, look favorably upon our sacrifices." The end. Goddamn. Oh my god. Well, that it is in my opinion, 100%. Places can hold evil, can continue to hold evil. I say that in the most simplest terms. It's pretty hard to get rid of that, so even if you get rid of the big old bad evil thing, it's still there. It's like mold. You got the top part, but it's underground, rooted deeply. It is what it is. It's there. Like, Eldritch speaking wise. Yeah. That makes sense. I enjoy that. That was nice. But that was the horror of at Red Hook. A literal town. A no, a I think there was a street or like a couple of streets. But it was a section of a town. Evil, evil, evil within it. I enjoy the incantation. I enjoyed just him being an Irish person, and all of a sudden he sees a brick house, and goes, "That's bad. That bad. We don't do that here. We go now. We go now." But also, I found it very whatever the luminescent took from him. I'm assuming he took his blood over time. In reality, what that did was gave him a couple more days per se, I should say, or gave him a I want to say a mask of sorts, a mask of healthiness, where he brought to the normal world to begin that bridal thing, to start it kind of thing, and that's why he was able to marry, and the killing of the wife was just to summon or create the actual wife of his, not his actual wife, but the one he wants to marry, which was the incorporeal evil thing, or no, Lilith, which makes sense in that aspect of how that got to there and why she died. What did you expect? No, what did you like so far about that story? Was I able to pause enough to take breaths? All right, all right. Now for the next one, we will do he 1925. But in a minute, my mouth needs to take a break. Just a little one. But how are you guys doing so far? What's up? Do anything crazy lately? You drawing? By the way, this is gonna be my next update. To let you guys know. My little announcement. You only have a few more days, guys. You only have a few more days to do draw the challenge, draw the art challenge. This month it is drawing a monster from the depths of the dungeon. It is just a dungeon monster. What do you think would be in the depths of our crypts? You can use hand drawing, you can write about it, you can make a little story, you can go in Blender, create a little creature like Callie did. You can draw it up, you can draw it in real life, you can draw it on computer, you can even sculpture it if you really want to. But I will leave that to you, goblins. You only have till the end of this month. And I'm assuming by the either I'll do the literal last day of the month, or if I cannot make it, I will inform you guys what day I will be doing that then. But no matter what last day, if I cannot do it last day, I will do it on Discord. No matter what, I will let you guys know what's happening there. And for knowledge of the winner will get their own customized little role within our Discord server, little community thing. Also, they'll gain VIP within Twitch if they don't already have it. The one thing I will say is it will be a monarchy of sorts. Once you win, you will have the crown of the winner, to know the crown, you will have the role. But if the next month happens, and so it will happen, and if you do not win, you will then lose the role. You will keep VIP for obvious reasons, but you will lose that role. You will lose the top tier of your own little role in server. And the only thing I will say is, whatever you name it, it has to be you original you make your own you make your own tag from Call of Duty bullshit. It can be as sus as you want it to be, as long as to a degree. I will say right now, to a degree, it can be as sus as you want. Don't be derogative. Don't be rude within it. Obviously, no racism. That's it. Don't play those cards. But everything else, go for it. You're mature to a degree. All right, all right. I'm gonna grab a little snack because I'm hungry as well. So I will be right back, and when we get back, we will be reading He, 1925. Mwah. Mwah.
Alrighty. I am back from God knows where. Where is the thing I'm thinking of? You know, I'm back. Don't worry. I'm still here. Well, mm, Alright. But no, yeah, I like just shoveled like a whole bowl of healthy cereal because I was hungry. I had nothing in my tummy, so there we go. Food, food. Got ah. All right. Just as before. This is probably gonna be the last story because my throat can't handle more than these long boys because these long boys are long. Not gonna lie. He 1925. Mm. I saw him on a sleepless night when I was walking desperately to save my soul in my vision. My coming to New York had been a mistake, for whereas I had looked so poignant and wonder and inspiration in the teeming labyrinths of ancient streets and twist endlessly from the forgotten courts and squares and waterfronts to courts and squares and waterfronts equally forgotten in the encyclopedian modern towers and pinnacles that rise blackly Babylonian under waning moons. I had found instead only a sense of horror, an oppression which threatened to master and paralyze and annihilate me. Sounds like me. The disillusion, it had been gradual, coming for the first time upon the town. I had seen it in the sunset from a bridge, majestic above its waters and incredible peaks and pyramids, rising flower-like and delicate from pools of violet mist to play with the flaming golden clouds and the first stars of evening. Then it had lighted up window by window above shimmering tides, where lanterns nodded and glided, and deep horns bayed weird harmonies, and itself become a starry firmament of dream redolent of fairy magic music. And one of the marvels of Carcassonne and Samarcand and El Dorado, and all glorious and half fabulous cities. Shortly after, I was taken through those antique ways so dear to my fancy, narrow, curving alleys, in passages where roses of red Jordan blinked with small paned dormers above pillared doorways that looked on gilded sedans and paneled coaches, and in the first flush of realization of these long wished things, I thought I had indeed achieved such treasures as would make me in time a poet. But success and happiness were not to be. Garish daylight, shrewd, only squalor and alienage, and the noxious elephantius of climbing and spreading stone where the moon had hinted of loveliness and elder magic. Then the throngs of people enseaved through the flume-like streets were squat, swarthy strangers with hardened faces and narrow eyes, shrewd with strangers, without dreams and without kinship to the scenes about them, who could never mean to aught to a blue-eyed man of the old folk, with the love of fair green lanes and white New England village steeples in his heart. So instead of the poems I had hoped for, there came only a shuddering blankness and an ineffable loneliness. And I saw at the last a fearful truth, which no one had ever dared to breathe before, the unwhisperable secrets of secrets. The fact of the city of stone and strider is not a sentient perpetuation of old New York as London is of old London, and Paris of old Paris, but is in fact quite dead, its sprawling body imperfectly embalmed and infested with queer animate objects, things which have nothing to do with it, as if it was in life. Upon making this discovery, I ceased to sleep uncomfortably, though something of resigned tranquillity came back as I gradually formed the habit of keeping off the streets by day and venturing abroad only at night,
when darkness calls forth, what little of the past still hovers wraith-like about, in old white doorways, remember the stalwart forms that once passed through them. With this mode of relief, I even wrote a few poems, and still refrained from going home to my day lest I seem to crawl back ignobly in defeat. Pause. Good luck, pilot. Planes are scary. Good luck. Fly good, pilot. But yeah, it has Wi-Fi. Oh my god. Oh my god. I know Twitch like has a thing that you can use for just sound. I'll give you an ASMR of where I am right now. I'm in the chat room. I'm with the chicken nuggies. What you can do is turn off display. If you're using your mobile, turn off the display and use only sound mode. Go into the settings. I think there's like a little bar thingy right now. Use that bad boy. I sleep on planes. I will never. I hate planes. I hate them. I understand faster travel, easier travel, kind of things, but to me that is unstable ground, and I fear it. I can climb trees. I can go ski. I can go ski lifting. I can go ziplining because I know it's connected to the ground. Theoretically, it's connected to the ground, but if it's not connected to the ground, I fear. All right, unpause. Then, on a sleepless night walk, I met the man. It was in the grotesque hidden courtyard of the Greenwich section. Of there my ignorance I had settled, having heard of the place as a natural home of poets and artists. The archaic lanes and the houses of unexpectedly bits of square and court had indeed delighted me, and when I found the poets and artists to be loud-voiced pretenders whose acquaintance is tinsel and whose lives are a denial of that pure beauty of which is poetry and art, I stayed on for love in those venerable places. I fancied them as they were in their prime, when Greenwich was a placid village not yet engulfed by the town, and in the hours before dawn, when all the revelers had slunk away. I used to wander alone among the cryptical windings in a brood upon curious arcana which generations must have deposited there. This kept my soul alive, and gave me a few of those dreams and visions for which the poet far within me cried out. The man came upon me at about 2 1 cloudy August morning, as I was threading a series of detached courtyards, now accessible only through unlighted hallways of intervening buildings, but once forming parts of the continuous network of picturesque alleys. I had heard of them by vague rumor and realized that they could not be opened by any map today, but the fact that they were forgotten only endeared them to me, so that I had sought them out with twice my usual eagerness. Now that I had found them, my eagerness was again redoubled, for something in their arrangement dimly hinted that they might be only a few of many such, with dark, dumb counterparts wedged obscurely betwixt high blank walls and desert rear tenements, or lurking lamplessly behind archways, betrayed by hordes of the foreign-speaking, or guarded by furtive and uncommunicative artists whose practices do not invite publicly or the light of day. He spoke to me without invitation, noting my mood and glances as I studied certain knockered doorways above iron railed steps. Water. Needs water. His own face was in shadow, and he wore a wide-brimmed hat which somehow blended perfectly with the out dark cloak he affected. But I was subtly disquieted even before he addressed me. Hmm. Hmm. His form was very slight, thin, and almost to cadaverousness, and his voice proved phenomenally soft and hollow, though not particularly deep. He said, noticed me several times at my wanderings, and inferred that I resembled him in loving the vestiges of former years. Would I not like the guidance of one long practiced in these explorations and possessed of local information, profoundly deeper than any which an obviously newcomer could possibly have gained? As he spoke, I caught a glimpse of his face in the yellow beam of a solitary attic window. It was a noble, even a handsome, elderly countenance, and bore the marks of lineage and refinement, unusual for the age and place. Yet some quality about it disturbed me, almost as much as its features pleased me. Perhaps it was too white, or too expressionless, or too much out of keeping with the locality, to make me feel easy and uncomfortable. Nonetheless, I followed him, for in those dreary days my quest for antique beauty and mystery was all that I had followed him. I had to keep my soul alive, and I reckoned it's a rare favor of fate to fall in with one of those whose kindred seekings seemed to have penetrated so much farther than mine. Something in the night constrained the cloaked man into silence, and for a long hour he, he led forward without needless words, making only the briefest of comments concerning ancient names and dates and changes, and directing my progress very largely by gestures as we squeezed through intersections, tiptoed through corridors, clambered over brick walls, and once crawled on hands and knees through a low-arched passage of stone whose immense length and tortuous twistings effaced at last every hint of geographical location I had managed to preserve. The things we saw were very old and marvelous, or at least they seemed so in few striking rays of light by which I viewed them. I shall never forget the tottering Ionic columns of fluted pilasters and urn-headed iron fence posts and flaring intel windows and decorative fanlights that appeared to grow quainter and stranger the deeper we advanced in this inexhaustible maze of unknown antiquity. We met no one person, and as time passed, the lighted windows became fewer and fewer. Streetlights, as we first encountered, had been of oil and of ancient lozenge pattern. Later, I noticed someone with candles, and at last, traversing a horrid, unlighted corridor, where my guide had to lead with his gloved hand through total blackness to a narrow wooden gate in a high wall. We came to a fragment of alley lit only by lanterns in front of every seventh house, unbelievably colonial and tin lanterned, with conical tops and holes punched in the sides. This alley led steeply uphill, more steeply than I thought possible in this part of New York. In the upper end was blocked squarely by the ivy-clad wall of a private estate, beyond which I could see a pale cupola, and the tops of trees waving against the vague lightness in the sky. In this wall was a small low-arched gate of nail-stone, studded black oak, which the man possessed to unlock with a ponderous key. Leading me within, he steered a course in utter blackness over what seemed to be a gravel path, and finally, up a flight of stone steps, to the door of a house which he unlocked and opened for me. We entered, and as we did so I grew faint from a reek of infinite mustiness which wailed out to meet us, and which must have been the fruit of unwholesome centuries of decay. My host appeared not to notice this, and in courtesy I kept silent, and he piloted me up a curving stairway across a hall and into a room whose door I heard him unlock behind us. Locked behind us. Oh, he locked. Oh no. Then I saw him pull the curtains of the three small pane windows that barely strewed themselves against the lightening sky, after which he crossed to the mantel, struck flint and steel, lighted the candles of candelabrum of 12 sconces, and made a gesture joining soft-toned speech. In this feeble radiance, I saw that we were in a spacious, well-furnished and paneled library, dating from the first quarter of this 18th century, with splendid doorway with pediments, a delightful Doric cornice, and a magnificently carved ornamental with scroll and urn top of the crowded bookshelves. With at intervals along with the walls were well-wrought family portraits, all tarnished to an enigmatic dimness, and bearing an unmistakable likeness to the man who now motioned me to a chair beside the graceful Chippendale table. Before seating himself across the table from me, my host paused for a moment as if in embarrassment, then entirely removed his gloves. Wide-brimmed hat and cloak stood theatrically revealed in full mid-Georgian costume, from cute hair and neck ruffles to knee breeches, silk hose, and knee-buckled shoes I had not previously noticed. Now, slowly sinking into the lyre-back chair, he commenced to eye me intently. Without his hat, he took on an aspect of extreme age, which was scarcely visible before, and I wonder if this was his unperceived mark of a singular longevity, or not one of the sources of original disquiet. When he spoke at length, his soft, hollow, and carefully muffled voice was not infrequently quavered, and now and then I had a great difficulty in following him as I listened with a thrill of amazement and half disavowed alarm which grew each instant. You behold, sir, my host began, a man of very inessential habits, for whose costume no apology need be offered to one with your wit and inclinations. Reflections upon better times. I have not scrupled to ascertain their ways and adopt their dress and manners, and indulge which offends none if practiced without ostentation. It hath been my good fortune to retain the rural seat of my ancestors swallowed through, though it has been by two towns, first Greenwich, which built up hither after 1800, then New York, which joined on near 1830. There were many reasons for the close keeping of this place in my family. I have not been remiss in discharging the close keeping of this place in my family, and I have not been remiss in discharging some obligations. The squire who succeeded to it in 1768 studied certain arts and made certain discoveries, all connected with influences residing in this particular plot of ground, and eminently deserving of the strongest guarding. Some curious effects of these arts and discoveries, and I now propose to shew you under the strictest secrecy, and I believe I may rely on my judgment of men enough to have no distrust of either your interest or your fidelity. He paused, but I could only nod my head. I have said that I was alarmed, yet to my soul nothing was more deadly than the material daylight world of New York. And whether this man were a harmless eccentric or a wielder of dangerous arts, I had no idea, no choice save to follow him and slake my sense of wonder on whatever he might have to offer. So I listened. To my ancestor, he softly continued, there appeared to be reside some very remarkable qualities in the will of mankind, qualities having a little suspected dominance not only over the acts of oneself and others, but over every variety of force and substances in nature, and over many elements in dimensions deemed more universal than nature herself. May I say, over many, that he floated that the sanctity of things as great as space and time, that he put to strange uses the rights of certain half-breed red Indians who once encamped upon this hill. These Indians shrewd choler when the place was built, and were plaguy, pestilent, and in asking to visit the grounds at the full of the moon. For years they stole over the wall each month when they could, and by stealth performed certain acts. Then in '68, the new squire catched them at their doings and stood still at what he saw. Therefore he bargained with them in exchange for the free access of his grounds, for the exact inwardness of what they did. Learning that their grandfathers got part of their custom and red ancestors and part of their old Dutchmen in the time of the state generals, and pox on him. I'm afeard the square must have served them monstrous bad rum, whether or not by intent. For a week after he learnt the secret, he was the only man living that knew it. You, sir, are the first outsider to be told there is a secret, and split me if I'd have risked tampering that much with the powers, had ye not been so hot after bygone things. I shuddered as the man grew colloquial, and with familiar speech of another day, he went on. But you must know, sir, that what the squire got from those mongrel judges was not but small parts of the learning. Oh my god. Oh my god, right, right, right. H.P. Lovecraft, right. Fuck. God damn it. I mean, he had not been at Oxford for nothing, nor talked nor account with an ancient grimest and astrologer in Paris. He was in fine made sensible that all the world is but the smoke of our intellects, past the bidding of the vulgar, but by the wise of the puffed out and drawn in, like any cloud of prime Virginia tobacco. What we want we may make about us, and what we don't want we may sweep away. I won't say that all this is wholly true in body, but 'tis sufficient true in furnish in a very pretty spectacle now and then. You, I conceive, would be tickled by a better sight of certain other years than your fancy affords you. So be pleased to hold back any fright of what I design to shew. Come to the window and be quiet. My host now took my hand and drew me to one of the two windows on the long side of the malodorous room, and at the first touch of his ungloved hands I turned cold. His flesh, though dry and firm, was the quality of ice, and almost shrank away from his pulling. But again, I thought of the emptiness and horror of reality, and boldly prepared to follow whithersoever I might be led. Once I went to the window, the man drew apart the yellow silk curtains and diverted my stare at the blackness outside. For a moment I saw nothing save a myriad of tiny dancing lights so far before me. Then, as if in response to an insidious motion of my host's hand, a flash of heat lightning played over the scene, and I looked out upon the sea of luxuriant foliage unpolluted, and not the sea of roofs to be expected by any normal mind. On my right of Hudson glittered wickedly, and in the distant head I saw the unhealthy shimmer of a vast salt marsh constellated with nervous fireflies. The flash died, and an evil smile illuminated the waxy face of an aged necromancer. That was before my time, before the new squire's time. Right, let us try again. I was faint, even fainter than the hateful modernity of that accursed city had made me. Good God, I whispered, can you do that for any time? And as he nodded, and bared the black stems of what had once been yellow fangs, I clutched the curtain to prevent myself from falling, but he steadied me with his terrible ice-cold claw, and once more made his insidious gesture. Again, and lightning flashed, but this time upon the scene, not wholly strange. It was Greenwick, that Greenwick that used to be, with here and there a roof or row of houses, as we see it now, yet with a lovely green lanes and fields and bits of grassy common. The marsh still glittered and beyond, but in the far distance I saw the steeples of what was then all of New York. Trinity and St. Paul's and the brick church dominating their sisters, and a faint haze of wood smoke hovering over the whole. I breathed hard, but not so much that the sight itself as from the possibilities of my imagination terribly conjured up. Can you, dare you, go far? I spoke with all, and I think he shared it for a second, but the evil grin returned.
Tentacle!
Tentacles. This old man's gonna like prop up some tentacles sooner or later. I can feel it. Also, hello, Kathy. Welcome in. Far, what I would have seen would blast you to the mad statue of stone. Back, forward. Look, he pulling black wit. And as he snarled the phrase under his breath, he gestured anew, bringing to the sky a flash of more blinding than either which had come before. For full 3 seconds, I could glimpse that pandemonic sight, and in those seconds, I saw a vista which will ever afterward torment me in dreams. I saw the heavens verminous with strange flying things, and beneath them a hellish black city of giant stone terraces and impious pyramids flung savagely to the moon. and devil lights burning from the unnumbered windows and swimming loathsomely on aerial galleries. I saw the yellow, squinted-eyed people of the city, robed horribly in orange and red, dancing insanely to the pounding of favorite kettle drums, the clatter of an obscene crotella, and the maniacal moaning of muted horns whose ceaseless dirges rose and fell undulatingly, like the waves of an unhallowed ocean of bitumen. I saw this vista, I say, and heard as with the mind's ear the blasphemous domdaniel of cacophony which accompanied it. It was a shrieking fulfillment of all the horror which that corpse city had ever stirred in my soul, and for every injunction to silence I screamed and screamed and screamed, as my nerves gave way and the walls quivered about me. Then, as the flash subsided, I saw that my host was trembling too, a look of shocking fear half blotting from his face the serpent distortion of rage with which my screams had excited. He tottered, clutched at the curtains as I had done before, and wriggled his head wildly, like a hunted animal. God knows he had a cause, for as those echoes of my screaming died away, came another sound of hellishly suggestive that only numbed emotion kept me sane and conscious. It was steady, stealthy creaking of the stairs beyond the locking door, as with the ascent of a barefoot, skin-shut horde. And at last the cautious, purposeful rattling of the brass latch that glowed in the feeble candlelight. The old man clawed and spat at me through the moldy air, and barked things in his throat, and swayed as it was with the yellow curtain he clutched. The full moon, damn ye helping dog, ye called them, and they've come for me. Oh, gods and feet, dead men, God sink ye. Oh my god, oh. Ye swoon yourself sick, curvy. You must need blames the squire that go you unhand that latch. I'm not for ye here. At this point, 3 slow and very deliberate raps shook the panels of the door, and a white foam gathered at the mouth of the frantic magician. His fright turning to a steely despair left room for a resurgence of his rage against me, and he stared a step forward to the table on whose edge I was steady myself. The curtains were still clutched in his right hand as his left clawed out at me, grew taut, and finally crashed down from their lofty fastenings, emitting to the room a flood of that full moonlight which the brightening of the sky had presaged. In those greenish beams, the candles paled, and a new semblance of decay spread over the musk-reeking room, with its wormy paneling, sagging floor, battered mantel, and rickety furniture, and ragged draperies. It spread over the man, too, whether from the same source or because of his fear and vehemence, and I saw him shrivel and blacken as he lurched near the stove to rend me with vulnerable talons. Only his eyes stayed whole, and they glared with propulsive, dilated incandescences which grew as the face around them charred and dwindled. The rapping was now repeated with great insistence, and this time bore a hint of metal. The black thing faced me, and it had become only a head with eyes, importantly trying to wriggle across the sinking floor in my direction, and occasionally emitting feeble little spits of immortal malice. Now swift and splintering blows assailed those sickly panels, and I saw the gleam of a tomahawk as it cleft the rending wood. I did not move, for I could not, but I watched dazedly as the door fell in pieces to emit a colossal, shapeless influx of inky substance. Starred with shining, malevolent eyes, it poured thickly like a flood of oil, bursting a rotten bulkhead, where a blackened head, where the eyes still glared at me. Around the head it closed, totally swallowing up, and in another moment it had begun to recede, bearing away its invisible burden without touching me. The flowing again out of the black doorway and down the ancient stairs which creaked as before, though in reverse order. Then the floor gave way at last, and I slid gaspingly down into the nighted chamber below, choking in with cobwebs and half-swooning terror. The green moon, shining through broken windows, showed me the hall door half open, and as I rose from the plaster-strewn floor and twisted myself free from the sagged ceilings, I saw a sweep past it in an awful torrent of blackness. with scores of baleful eyes glowing in it. It was seeking the door to the cellar, and when I found it, it vanished therein. I now felt the floor of this lower room giving as that of the upper chamber had done, and once a crashing above had been followed by the fall past the west window of something which must have been the cupola, now liberated for the instant from the wreckage. I rushed through the hall to the front door, and finding myself unable to open it, seized a chair and broke a window, climbing frenziedly out upon the unkempt lawn. That's how you escape a goddamn horror house. If it's locked, if they lock it, just break a window. Easy. Break the hinges. Even easier too. The wall was high, and all the gates were locked, but moving a pile of boxes in a corner, I managed to gain the top of clinging to the great stone urn set there. About me and my exhaustion, I could see only strange walls and windows and old gambrel roofs. The steep street of my approach was nowhere visible, and the little did I see succumb rapidly to the mist that rolled in from the river, despite the glaring moonlight. Suddenly, the urn to which I clung to began to tremble, as if staring at my own lethal dizziness. And in another instant, my body plunged downward to I knew not what fate. The man who found me said I must have crawled a long way despite my broken bones, for a trail of blood stretched off as far as he dared look. And gathering rain soon effaced this link with the scene of my ordeal, and reports could state no more than I had appeared from the place unknown at an entrance of a little black court off Perry Street. I never sought to return to those tenebrous labyrinths, nor would I direct any sane man thither if I could. Or who or what that ancient creature was, I have no idea. But I repeat that the city is dead and full of unsuspected horrors. Whether he has gone, I do not know. But I have gone home to pure England lanes up which fragrant sea winds sweep at evening. Mm, mm. And that is he. How do you guys like that one? Who did you like more, the main man or he, the magician, the wizard, the weird man, the man who became literal dust? That was something though. That hurt my brain. Wait, how long is the next one? 5, 6, 7, 8. Only four. Only four. Okay. Only four. Okay. I can do that one. Okay. Yeah. I'll do a bonus one. One more. Hmm. Gonna do a little sippy sip first though. I enjoy both stories though so far. Have both taking place in New York. Like, guys, don't go to New York for your own safety. For your own safety, don't go to New York. Don't do it. It's supposedly very bad, very horror-esque. It's a dead city. Don't go there. I mean it. Don't do it. But I also love that he went back to England, the place of the things. But also things happened in England to that. I remember there's more stories up above that were in England. So this man's fucked. Either way, he's fucked. He left New York from one evil to going to another evil. He's fucked. He's done for. He's like, oh yeah, I'm going back to the place of the windy paths in the bright lights. It's pretty nice. And the comfy homes. No, he's fucked. He's done for. He doesn't know. He's going no though. He's going no. All right, all right. I needed to send a message first because I don't know. How big is Diablo? No, 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 not the creature Diablo. Not the creature Diablo. Unless, actually, know what? Know what? Actually, someone please look up how big is Diablo? Like the being. How big is Diablo? I wouldn't mind knowing this. Just for scientific purposes. How much gigabytes are you? You still aren't gonna tell me? Shame, shame. Shame. Okay, fine. I'll go to Google. I'll go to Google for this. Hmm. Show me this instead. Fine. Show me this instead. Show. I might be able to download that later. Money tree. Hmm. All right, so Belknap. Was that's 25-ish? Okay. Okay. All right. Before you get into that, then fine. We'll get into the vault. We'll get into the vault now. In the vault, 1925, same year. Dedicated to C.W. Smith, from whose suggestion central situation is taken. There's nothing more absurd, as I view it, than the unconventional association of the homely and the wholesome, which seems to pervade the psychology of a multitude mention of bucolic Yankee setting and bungling and thick-fibered village undertaker, and a careless mishap in a tomb, and no average reader can be brought to expect more than a hearty, albeit grotesque, phase of comedy. God knows, though, that prosy tale which George Birch's death permits me to tell, as it has in its aspect beside which has some of the darkest tragedies are light, which required a limitation and changed his business in 1881, yet never discussed the case of when he could avoid it. Never did his old physician, Dr. Davis, who died years ago. It generally stated that the affliction and shock were results of an unlucky slip, whereby Birch had locked himself for 9 hours in the receiving tomb of Peck Valley Cemetery, escaping only by crude and disastrous mechanical means. But while this much was undoubtedly true, there were other and things which the man used to whisper to me in his drunken delirium toward the last. He confided in me. I was his doctor, and he probably felt the need of confiding someone else after Davis died. He was a bachelor, wholly without relatives. Birch, before 1881, had been the village undertaker of Peck Valley, and he was a calloused and primitive specimen, even as such specimens go. The practices I heard attributed to him would be unbelievably today, at least in a city, and even Peck Valley would have shuddered a bit at had it known the easy ethics of its mortuary artists in such a debatable matters as the ownership of costly laying out apparel, invisible beneath the casket lid, and the degree of the dignity to be maintained in posing and adapting the unseen members of lifeless tenants to containers not always calculated with sublimeness and accuracy. Most distinctly, Birch was lax, insensitive, and professionally undesirable. Yet I still wait a minute. Are you telling me that at least I'm going to assume at least one of these dead bodies was displaying the middle finger or doing the pog face? Bet this man was prime of his time, barbaric but prime of his time. He is the reason of literal free will. Imagine one of the friends says, maybe we can draw a mustache on his face, and the practitioner's like, okay, let's do it, and just gives him a whole new makeover. Hmm. Just where to begin Birch's story, I can hardly decide, since I am no practiced teller of tales. I suppose one should start in the cold December of 1880, when the ground froze and the cemetery delvers found they could dig no more graves till spring. Fortunately, the village was small and the death rate low, so that it was possible to give all the Birch inanimate charges a temporary haven in a single antiquated receiving tomb. The undertaker grew doubly lethargic in the bitter weather, and seemed to outdo himself even in his carelessness. Never did he knock together flimsier and ungainlier caskets, or disregard more flagrantly the needs of the rusty lock on the tomb door, which he slammed open and shut with such nonchalant abandon. At last the spring thaw came, and graves were laboriously prepared for the 9 silent harvests of the grim reaper which waited in the tomb. Birch, through dreading the bother of removal and interment, began his task of transference one disagreeable April morning, but ceased before noon because of the heavy rain that seemed to irritate his horse. After having laid but one mortal tenement to its permanent rest, that was Darius Peck, the non-Nigerian generian, whose grave was not far from the tomb, but decided that he would begin the next day with little old Matthew Fenner, whose grave was also nearby, but actually postponed the matter for 3 days. Not getting to work. Oh god, that's bad for the bodies. That's actually very bad for the bodies. Mm. Ugh. This guy is. Ugh. So then the events that greatly changed George Birch. On the afternoon of Friday, April 15th, then, Birch set out for the tomb with horse and wagon to transfer the body of Matthew Fenner. That he was not perfectly sober, and subsequently admitted, though he had not taken to the wholesale of drinking by which he later tried to forget certain things. He was just dizzy and careless, enough to annoy his sense of horse, which, as he drew it viscously up at the tomb, neighed and pawed and tossed its head, much as at the former occasion when the rain had vexed it. The day was clear, and a high wind had sprung up, and Birch was glad to get to shelter as he unlocked the iron door and entered the side hill vault. Another might not have relished the damp, odorous chamber with the 8 careless placed coffins, but Birch in those days was insensitive, and was concerned only in getting the right coffin to the right grave. He had not forgotten the criticism aroused when House Bixby's relatives, wishing to transport her body to the cemetery in the city, where they had moved, found the casket of Judge Capwell beneath her headstone. The light was dim, but Birch's sight was good, and he did not get an Asif coffin by mistake, although it was very similar. He had indeed made the coffin for Matthew Fenner, but had cast it aside at last as too awkward and flimsy, in a fit of curious sentimentality, aroused by recalling how kindly and generous the little old man had been on him during his bankruptcy 5 years before. He gave old man the very best his skill could produce, but was thrifty enough to save the rejected specimen, and to use it when, as if Sawyer died of the malagent fever. Sawyer was not a lovable man, and not many stories were told of his almost inhuman vindictiveness and tenacious memory for wrongs real or fancied to him. To him, Birch had felt no complication in assigning the carelessness made coffin, which he now pushed out of the way in his quest for the thunder casket. Hmm. It was just as he had recognized old Matt's coffin that the door slammed to the wind, leaving him in the dusk even deeper than before. The narrow transom admitted only the feeble rays in the overhead ventilation funnel, virtually none at all, so that he reduced to a profane fumbling as he made his halting among the long boxes toward the latch. In his funeral twilight, he rattled with rusty handles, pushed at the iron panels, and wondered why the massive portal had grown so suddenly recalcitrant. In this twilight, too, he began to realize the truth and to shout loudly, as if his source outside could do more than neigh and unsympathetically reply. The long neglected latch was obviously broken, leaving the careless undertaker trapped in the vault, a victim of his own oversight. The thing must have happened at about 33 in the afternoon. Birch, being by temperament phlegmatic and practical, did not shout long, but proceeded to grope about for some tools which he recalled seeing in the corner of the tomb. It is doubtful whether he was touched at all by the horror and exquisite weirdness of his position, but the bold fact of the imprisonment, so far from the daily pass of man, was enough to exasperate him thoroughly. His day's work was sadly interrupted, and unless chance presented him brought some rambler hither, he would have to remain all night or longer. The pile of tools soon reached, and a hammer and chisel selected. Birch returned over the coffins to the door, and the air had begun to be exceedingly unwholesome. But to this detail he paid no attention as he toiled, half by feeling and at the heavy and corroded metal of the latch. He would have been get rid of. Oh my God, words. Half by feeling in the heavy and corroded metal of the latch, he would have given much for a lantern or a bit of candle, but lacking these, bungled, semi-sightlessly as best he might. When he perceived that the latch was hopelessly unyielding, at least to such meager tools and under such tenebrous conditions as these, Birch glanced for other possible points of escape. The vault had been dug from a hillside, so the narrow ventilation tunnel in the top ran through the several feet of earth, making this directly utterly useless to consider. Over the door, however, the high slit like transom in the brick facade gave promise of possible enlargement to a diligent worker. Hence, upon this, his eyes long rested as he racked his brains for means to reach it. There was nothing like a ladder in this tomb, and the coffin niches on the sides and the rear, which Birch seldom took the trouble to use, afforded no ascent to the space above the door. Only the coffins themselves remained as potential stepping stones. As he considered these, he speculated on the best mode of arranging them. 3 coffins' heights, he reckoned, would permit him to reach the transom, but he could do better with 4. The boxes were fairly even, and could be piled up like blocks. So he began to commute. Oh my god! No, he's gonna. No. Is he planning? He could not. I mean, like your survival goes over the ones that are already dead. I agree with this statement no matter what. And if I were dead, I would agree with this. Because I'm already dead. That'd be the answer. I'm already dead, so like if I can be useful of your escape, go for it. GG, no re, usual. Finally, he decided to lay a base of the three parallel with the wall, to place upon this 2 layers of 2 each. Oh my god, I'm losing it, guys. I'm losing my words. They're gone. Finally, he decided to lay a base of the 3 parallel with the wall, to place upon this 2 layers of each, and upon these a single box to serve as a platform. An arrangement could be ascended with a minimum with a minimum of awkwardness and would furnish that desired height. Better still, though, he would utilize only 2 boxes at the base to support the superstructure, leaving one free to be piled up on top in case the actual feat of escape required an even greater altitude. And so the prisoner toiled in the twilight, heaving the unresponsive remnants of mortality with little ceremony of his miniature tower Babel, rose course by course. Several of the coffins began to split under the stress of handling, and he planned to save the stoutly built casket little Matthew found on for the top. Wouldn't you want the stoutly built, the properly built one on the bottom? Isn't that what you want? Because the ones on the bottom are gonna break open. Stinky. All right, this man is silly. In order that his feet might have as certain a surface as possible. In the semi-gloom, he trusted mostly to select the right one, and indeed came upon it almost by accident, since it tumbled into his hands as though some odd volition, after he had unwillingly placed it beside another of the third layer. The tower at length finished, and in his aching arms, rested by a pause during which he had sat on the bottom step of his grimmest device. Birch cautiously ascended with his tools and stood abreast of the narrow transom. The borders of the space were entirely of brick, and there seemed little to doubt that he could shortly chisel away enough to allow his body to pass. As his blows began to fall, the horse outside whinnied in a tone which may have been encouraging and may not have been mocking. In either case, it would have been appropriate for the unexpected tenacity, for an easy-looking brickwork was surely sardonic commentary on the vanity of mortal hopes, and the source of a task whose performance deserved every possible stimulus. Dusk fell and found Birch still toiling. He worked largely by feeling now, since newly gathered clouds hid in the moon, and so progress was still slow. He felt heartened at the extent of his encroachments at the top and bottom of the aperture. He was sure, get out by midnight, though it was characteristic of him that this thought was untinged with eerie implications, undisturbed by oppressive reflections on the time, the place, and the company beneath his feet. He philosophically chipped away at the stony brickwork, cursing when a fragment hit him in the face, and laughing when one struck the increasingly excited horse that pawed near the cypress tree. In time, the whole grew so large that he ventured to try his body in it now and then. Oh my god, don't do it, man. No. Hole grew so large that he eventually tried to try his body in it now. Shifting about so that the coffins beneath him rocked and creaked, he would not, he found, have to pile another on his platform to make proper height, for the hole was on exactly the right level to use as soon as its size might permit. It might have been midnight at least when Birch decided he couldn't get through the transom, tired and perspiring, despite many arrests. He descended to the floor and sat a while on the bottom box to gather strength for the final wriggle and leap to the ground outside. The hungry horse was neighing repeatedly and almost uncannily, and he vaguely wished it would stop. He was curiously annihilated over this impeding escape, and almost dreaded the exertion for his form. Had the indolent stoutness of early middle age, he had remounted in the splintering coffins. He had felt his weight very poignantly, especially when upon reaching the topmost one, he heard that aggravated crackle which bespeaks the wholesale rending of wood. He had, it seems, planned in vain when choosing the stout coffin on the platform, for no sooner was his full bulk again upon it, than the rotting lid gave way, jouncing him 2 feet down on the surface, which he did not care to imagine. Maddened by the sound or the stench which bellowed forth, even to the open air, Waiting Horse gave a scream that was too frantic for a neigh, and plunged madly off through the night, the wagon rattling crazily behind it. Birch, in his ghastly situation, was now too low for an easy scramble out of the enlarged transom, but gathered his energies to determine to try. Clutching the edges of the aperture, he sought to pull himself when he noticed a queer inclination in the form of an apparent drag on both of his ankles. In another moment he knew fear for the first time that night, for struggle as he would, he could not shake clear the unknown grasp which held his feet relentlessly captivity. Horrible pains of the savage wounds shot through his calves, and in his mind was the vortex of fright mixed with the unquenchable materialism that suggested splinters, loose nails, or some other attribute of a breaking wooden box. Perhaps he screamed. At any rate, he kicked and squirmed frantically and automatically whilst his consciousness was almost eclipsed in a half swoon. Instinct guided him in his wriggle through the transom and in the crawl, which followed his jarring thud. The ground. He could not walk, it appeared, and the emerging moon must have witnessed a horrible sight as he dragged his bleeding ankles toward the cemetery lodge, his fingers clawing black mold in brainless haste, and his body responding with that maddening slowness from which one suffers when chased by the phantoms of nightmare. There was evidently, however, no pursuer, for he was alone and alive when Armington, the lodge keeper, answered his feeble clawing at the door. Armington helped Birch to the outside of a spare bed and sent his little son Edwin to Dr. Davis. The afflicted man was fully conscious, but would say nothing of any consequence, merely muttering such things as "Oh my ankles, let go," or shut in the tomb." Then the doctor came with his medicine case and asked crisp questions, and removed the patient's outer clothing, shoes, and socks. And the wounds for both ankles were frightfully lacerated about the Achilles tendons. It seemed to puzzle the old physicians greatly. And finally, almost to frighten him, his questioning grew more than medically intense, and his hands shook as he dressed the mangled members, binding them as if he wished to get the wounds out of sight as quickly as possible. For an impersonal doctor, Davis' ominous and awestruck cross-examination began very strange indeed, as he sought to drain from the weakened undertaker every last detail of his horrible experience. He was oddly anxious to know if Birch was sure, absolutely sure, of the identity of that top coffin was of the pile, how he had chosen it, how he had been certain of it as the Fenner coffin in the dusk, and how he had distinguished it from the inferior duplicate coffin of Viscus Asaph Sawyer. Would the firm Fenner casket have caved in so readily? Davis, an old-time village practitioner, had of course seen both at the respective funerals, as indeed he had intended both Fenner and Sawyer in their last illnesses. He had even wondered at Sawyer's funeral how the vindictive farmer had managed to lie straight in the box so closely akin to that of a diminutive Fenner. After a full 2 hours, Dr. Davis left, urging Birch to insist at all times that his wounds were caused entirely by loose nails and splintering wood. What else, he added, could ever in any case be proved or believed? But it would be well to say as little as he could be said, and to let no other doctor treat the wounds. Birch heeded this advice all the rest of his life, till he told me his story. And when I saw the scars, ancient, whitened, and as they were, I agreed that he was wise in so doing. He always remained lame, for the great tendons had been severed, but I think the greatest lameness was in his soul. His thinking processes, once so phlegmatic and logical, had become ineffably scarred, and it was pitiful to note his response to certain chances, allusions such as Friday, tomb, coffin, and words less obvious concatenation. His frightened horse had gone home, but his frightened wits never quite did that. He changed his business, but something had always preyed upon him. It may have just been fear. It may have just been fear mixed with a queer, belated sort of remorse by bygone crudities. His drinking, of course, only aggravated what it was meant to alleviate. When Dr. Davis left Birch that night, he had taken a lantern and gone to the old receiving tomb. The moon was shining on the scattered brick fragments of the marred facade, and the latch of the great old door ready to touch from the outside. Steeled by the old ordeals in the dissecting room, the doctor entered it and looked about, stifling the nausea of mind and body to everything in sight. The smell induced, he cried aloud once, and a little later gave a gasp that was more of a table than a cry. Then he fled back to the lodge and broke all the rules of his calling by rousing and shaking his patient and hurling at him a succession of shuddering whispers that seared into bewildered ears like a hissing virtual. It was Asaf's cave, coffin, Birch, just as I thought. I knew his teeth, but the front one's missing, and upper jaw. Never, for God's sake, shoe those wounds. The body was pretty badly gone, but if I ever saw vindictiveness on any face or former face, you know what a fiend he was for revenge. How he ruined old Raymond 30 years after their boundary suit, and how he stepped on the puppy that snapped at him a year ago last August. He was the devil incarnate, Birch, and I believe his eye for an eye fury could be old Father Death himself. God, what a rage! I hate to have it aimed at me. Why did you do it, Birch? He was a scoundrel. I don't blame you for giving him a cast aside a coffin, but you always did go too damn far. Well enough for to skimp on things, on something, some way. But you knew what a little man old Fenner was. I'll never get the picture out of my head as long as I live. You kicked hard. Barasov's coffin was on the floor. His head was broken in, and everything was tumbled about. I've seen sights before, but there was one thing too much here. An eye for an eye, great heavens, Birch. You got what you deserved. The skull turned my stomach. But the other was worse. Those ankles cut neatly off to fit Matt Fenner's cast-aside coffin. Yep, yep. Mmm, mmm, mmm. Well, that was the vault. The vault, the tomb. Also, that'll be the last one because my throat be aching just a little bit. But I have a question. That question mark. Let me see. Let me see what stories I have actually. Let me see. Let me see because I might be able to start it now and hopefully it'll be done by then. Because I got like 5 hours before Callie gets on. That's for sure. That's like 4 or 5 hours usually. About. That's fact. That's just fact. All right. All right. Can I install it? How much is it? How much is this? I know you brought it up too as well, Kathy, but like I don't know how much it is. Not money wise, but like gigabytes. Because I might have to delete a game. I want to do that, but I may have to. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, well, I'll see you too as well. Have a good one. Thank you for popping by. It's 80 gigabytes. Ugh. Oh my god. Oh my god. I'm not made of gigabytes. I'm not made of terabytes either. Oh no. What do I do? Alright. Alright. Alright.
um um um
Alright. Alright. I'm gonna close that. I'm actually gonna close the other thing as well. Do I need anything on Steam to delete? Question mark. If so, I'll do so. Let's do install locally. 'Cause, 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 'cause
Mm, swap meet isn't that much either. I think it's like less than a gigabyte. I think. Go to you. Let's go down to here. Version storage 2 GB space. It's fine. Yeah. That wouldn't do anything for me then. Okay. Okay. So I may have to delete Diablo or something else. Just be a shame. Just to be a shame right now. Edge. I'll uninstall that for now. Uninstall that for now. That's fine. I need the space. Close that up. Close that up. Open up GOG. I hope that's enough space. Question mark. I don't do I have enough space? Download? Question mark. Download. Okay. All right. So I've deleted Phasmophobia. I'm downloading Anthem. I'm doing the thing. I think. I think it's doing the thing. It might take a while. So I may not be able to play today. I hope. I hope I can. I hope I can. Okay. Cool. 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 All right. Close that up. And then let's see here. I'm thinking what we can play then. Right? No, you're right. Right? Yes. You know. Yeah. Yeah. I got you now. I got you now. Okay. Okay. I'm gonna take a small break. I will be right back. But afterwards, we're gonna play some Avowed until I'm called upon.